It's 1095, and you're a knight, adrift in a world that feels like it's forgotten you. Your castle looms cold and quiet, its stone walls echoing with the monotony of days spent polishing a sword that's seen no action. The fields outside are peaceful, infuriatingly so. No wars, no tournaments, just peasants scraping by, too poor to rob and too weary to care. Your horse, a temperamental beast with a glare that matches your own, stamps restlessly in the stables. The highlight of your week. Strong-arming the local miller for an extra sack of flour, a petty victory that leaves you feeling more like a bully than a warrior. Your armor, once a symbol of glory, now mocks you with its mirror-like shine, reflecting a man teetering on the edge of irrelevance. One more ale-soaked evening, and you might just fade into the tavern's woodwork, another forgotten soul in a stagnant Europe. Then a spark ignites. Word spreads from Clermont, where Pope Urban II has stood before a crowd of knights, clerics, and dreamers, delivering a sermon that sets your blood on fire. Deus vult, he cries. God wills it. He paints a picture of a holy mission. March east, reclaim Jerusalem, and earn forgiveness for every sin you've ever committed. It's a deal too good to refuse. Eternal salvation, a chance to wield your sword for a cause greater than bullying millers, and, whispered in the shadows, the promise of loot beyond your wildest dreams. You can almost hear the clink of gold, the weight of relics in your hands. This isn't just a war. It's a lifeline, a chance to escape the suffocating boredom of your fiefdom and become something more. You're not alone in this fever. Across Christendom, knights like you are shaking off the dust of idleness, their chainmail jingling with purpose. But it's not just the armored elite. Peasants, too, are caught in the fervor, their lives a grinding cycle of mud and misery. For them, the Pope's call is a whisper of freedom, not just from sin, but from the relentless drudgery of their villages. They pack their tattered tunics, clutching pitchforks and saucepans, dreaming of a journey that might lift them from the cabbage-scented despair of home. You look at the mob forming around you, barefoot zealots, starry-eyed farmers, and knights with rusty swords, and wonder if this is an army or a traveling circus. Morale is high, but logic is nowhere to be found. The man beside you thinks Jerusalem is a 2-day walk. Another swears he saw a saint in his porridge that morning. The church's pitch is masterful, a blend of spiritual promise and practical necessity. Europe's a pressure cooker of restless nights, men trained for violence but with no wars to fight, raiding each other's lands like overgrown children. Urban's crusade is a release valve, redirecting your bloodlust from local pig pens to distant shores. It's medieval HR at its finest. Take your chaos, your swords, and your penchant for trouble, and export it to the Holy Land. You're no longer a local menace. You're a crusader, a title that carries weight, even if it comes with a death wish. The priests call it a pilgrimage, but you know better. It's a chance to trade your rusty blade for glory, to swap the monotony of mud for the thrill of conquest. Yet, beneath the excitement, a shadow lingers. You've heard the whispers, most crusaders never return. The road east is a graveyard of dysentery, dehydration, and bad decisions. The Middle Eastern sun will cook you inside your armor, and the locals aren't exactly rolling out the welcome mat. Still, the risk feels worth it. Back home, your life is a slow death by boredom. Out there, it's a gamble for immortality. If you survive, you'll return a hero, your name etched in tavern tales and church sermons. If you die, well, at least you'll go down swinging, not drowning in ale. You strap on your armor, its weight a familiar comfort, and join the throng heading east. The air hums with purpose, with the clash of steel and the murmur of prayers. For the first time in years, you feel alive. You're not just a knight anymore, you're a crusader, bound for a destiny that might just outshine the reflection in your polished shield. You're on the move, a knight among a ragtag horde trudging through the dust and mud of Europe's backroads in 1096. The First Crusade has begun, but calling it an army feels generous. It's more like a feverish mob, a chaotic blend of knights in dented armor, peasants clutching pitchforks, and wide-eyed zealots who think salvation is just over the next hill. Pope Urban II's call at Clermont still rings in your ears. Promises of forgiveness, glory, and a chance to escape the grinding monotony of your village. But as the weeks drag on, the reality of this holy mission starts to sink in. Your boots are wearing thin, your horse is surlier than ever, and the guy next to you is muttering prayers to a saint you're pretty sure doesn't exist. This is no grand march. It's a desperate, disorganized pilgrimage to nowhere certain. The enthusiasm that fueled the start is still there, flickering like a candle in a storm. You see it in the faces around you. Knights dreaming of gold-crusted relics, peasants imagining a life beyond their mud-caked fields. Back home, their world was small. A village where the most exciting event was a sheep escaping its pen or a neighbor fined for stealing firewood. Now they've traded that for a chance at something bigger, something divine. The Pope's promise of absolution is a powerful lure. You've all got sins to shed, stolen turnips, drunken brawls, or in your case that time you borrowed a rival's horse and conveniently forgot to return it. Salvation sounds like a fair trade for a long walk, even if the details are fuzzy. Jerusalem? Sure, you'll find it, eventually. But the road is a brutal teacher. Food runs out faster than you expected. The peasants who joined with nothing but a sack of hope are already scavenging, their dreams of glory replaced by hunger pangs. You share what little you have, a crust of bread so hard it could double as a weapon. But it's not enough. By week 2, people are eating grass, and by week 3, some are eyeing their neighbors' leather shoes with unsettling interest. Dysentery creeps through the ranks like a thief, claiming lives faster than any sword could. The barefoot pilgrim who marched beside you yesterday is gone today, his body left in a ditch, mourned only by flies. You try not to think about it, focusing instead on the horizon. But the horizon keeps lying. No holy city, no welcoming oasis. Just more dirt, more heat, more despair. The mob's diversity is its strength and its curse. Knights like you, trained for battle, ride alongside farmers who've never held a weapon sharper than a plough. There's a preacher who claims to see visions of angels, though you suspect it's the fever talking. A merchant tags along, selling overpriced water and muttering about trade routes. And then there's the kid, barely old enough to shave, who joined because he heard Jerusalem has streets of gold. You want to shake him, tell him those streets are more likely paved with sand and blood, but his hope is infectious. You envy it even as you know it's doomed. The leaders, if you can call them that, are no better. They bicker over routes, pointing at maps that look more like doodles than directions. One swears Cologne is in France. Another insists the sea is just beyond that forest. You're starting to suspect this crusade is less a divine mission and more an elaborate prank. Yet amidst the chaos there's a strange beauty. You're seeing the world, really seeing it for the first time. Villages you pass through have churches taller than anything back home, their bells ringing with a clarity that feels almost holy. Markets brim with strange fruits and fabrics, colors so vivid they hurt your eyes, accustomed as they are to the grey-brown smear of your village. You hear languages you can't understand, see faces that don't look like your neighbors, and smell air that doesn't reek of cabbage and regret. For a peasant like the one trudging beside you, whose entire life was a 5-mile radius of mud, this is a revelation. He stares at a stone bridge like it's a miracle, whispers about a river that doesn't stink. You catch yourself doing the same, marveling at a world you didn't know existed. The emotional toll is heavy, though. Every step takes you further from home, from the family you left behind in a haze of zeal. You think of the wife who kissed you goodbye, her eyes wet with fear, or the mother who pressed a worn cross into your hand, whispering prayers you barely heard. They're back there waiting while you're here, lost in a crowd that smells of sweat and desperation. Some nights, under a sky too vast for your village mind, you wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. But then you remember the Pope's words, the promise of a purpose bigger than yourself. You grip your sword, its weight a reminder of the knight you're supposed to be, and keep marching. Jerusalem is out there somewhere, and with it, a chance to be more than a forgotten man in a forgotten fiefdom. For now, you're part of something chaotic, flawed, and half-starved, but undeniably alive. You've been trudging for months, your boots caked with the mud of a dozen foreign fields, your body aching from endless marches through forests and hostile villages. The First Crusade has already stripped you of illusions. Glory feels distant when you're dodging dysentery and praying your horse doesn't collapse. You're starting to wonder if this whole venture is a cosmic jest, a divine bait and switch. Then, like a vision from a fevered dream, it appears on the horizon. Constantinople. Your medieval peasant brain stumbles, unable to process the sight. This isn't a city. It's a miracle, a glittering rebuke to the muddy hovels you call home. The walls hit you first. You've seen barriers before, rickety wooden fences, maybe a low stone wall if your lord was feeling ambitious. But these, they stretch skyward, vast and unyielding, layered like the scales of some ancient beast. Towers loom, manned by soldiers who move with a precision you've never seen in your ragtag mob. If your village had walls like these, you'd never have to chase pigs out of the neighbor's cabbage patch again. You step closer, your neck craning, and realize these fortifications could laugh off an army. They don't just protect, they proclaim a civilization so far beyond yours, it feels like stepping into a myth. Inside, the city is a sensory assault. Your jaw drops as you wander streets teeming with life. Markets overflow with silks in colors you didn't know existed, scarlet, azure, gold that shimmers like the sun itself. Merchants hawk spices whose scents make your nose twitch, a sharp contrast to the stale bread and boiled turnips of home. Fountains spout clean water, not the swampy sludge you're used to sipping. The Hagia Sophia rises like a cathedral built by angels, with too much time on their hands. Its dome so vast it seems to float, mocking the leaky thatched roofs of your village. You stand there, a knight in dented armor, feeling like a child lost in a king's palace. The people are no less striking. Constantinopolitans glide through the streets in robes of silk, dripping with jewelry that could buy your entire fiefdom. You, meanwhile, are caked in dirt, your chainmail rusted, your tunic reeking of goat and despair. The locals glance at you with a mix of pity and disdain, as if you're a barbarian tourist who wandered in wearing sweat-stained rags. You can't blame them. Compared to their elegance, you're the medieval equivalent of a vagrant clutching a pitchfork. Yet you can't tear your eyes away. This city is the crossroads of the world, where east meets west, where trade routes pour in treasures from lands you can't even pronounce. It's a slap in the face to everything you thought civilization meant. For the peasants in your group, the shock is even deeper. Back home, their world was a cycle of mud, sheep, and the occasional church sermon mumbled by a half-asleep priest. Now they're gawking at mosaics that shimmer with gold, at domes that seem to touch the heavens. One man, a farmer who's never seen a building taller than a barn, whispers that this must be what heaven looks like. You're not sure he's wrong. The food alone feels divine. Fresh bread that doesn't taste like sorrow, meat seasoned with spices you can't name, desserts dripping with honey that make your teeth ache with joy. You take a bite and realize your entire culinary life has been a crime against your tongue. But beneath the awe, a quiet resentment brews. This city's wealth makes your village look like an accident someone forgot to clean up. You see merchants haggling over sacks of silver for a single jar of spice, and you do the math. One of those jars could buy every chicken in your region. You start to dream, half guilty, of smuggling some of this treasure home. A silk scarf, a handful of pepper, anything to prove you've seen something beyond the mud. Constantinople isn't just a city. It's a challenge to everything you've known, a mirror that reflects your own insignificance. You're a knight, trained to fight for honor, but here you feel like a beggar at a banquet, hungry for a world you can't afford. The emotional weight of this moment lingers. You've marched for salvation, for glory, but Constantinople makes you question what you're fighting for. Is it God's will, or is it this, this dazzling, overwhelming proof that the world is bigger, richer, stranger than you ever imagined. You're not just a crusader anymore. You're a witness to a civilization that humbles your own. As you leave the city, your heart heavy with envy and wonder, you carry something new, a spark of ambition, a hunger to bring a piece of this grandeur back to Europe. You don't know it yet, but this moment will change more than your journey. It will change history itself. You're still reeling from Constantinople's grandeur, your mind swimming with images of golden domes and silk-draped merchants, when you stumble into a marketplace somewhere further east. The air hits you like a revelation, thick with scents that make your nose twitch and your stomach growl in ways you didn't know possible. Back home, food was a grim necessity, bread so dense it could double as a brick, porridge that tasted like wet hay, and the occasional boiled cabbage so bland it made you question the point of chewing. If you were lucky, maybe you'd get a scrap of salted pork, cured so long it might have been older than your village. But here, in this bustling market, your entire concept of eating implodes. You see merchants scooping strange powders, red, gold, black, green, onto scales with delicate spoons, waving the aromas toward you like a spell. The smell alone is witchcraft, compared to the damp, moldy air of your village. You're suspicious at first. Food with flavor? That's not natural. But curiosity wins. You sprinkle a pinch of something called pepper onto a stale crust of bread you've been carrying for weeks. The first bite is a shock. Spicy, sharp, alive. You sneeze so hard you nearly drop the bread, but you don't care. For the first time in your life, food isn't just fuel. It's an adventure. Then comes cinnamon, a warm, sweet dust that tastes like comfort itself, as if joy had been ground into powder. You suddenly understand why nobles back home hoard this stuff like gold, paying fortunes for a single pinch. The market is a kaleidoscope of wonders. Saffron threads glow like tiny embers, costing more than your horse. Cloves and nutmeg sit in sacks, their scents so potent they make your head spin. You watch a merchant haggle, trading a bag of pepper for a stack of silver coins that could buy every pig in your village. Pepper, the stuff that makes you sneeze, is worth more than your armor. You start doing medieval math. If you could just borrow a sack of it, you'd never shovel mud again. Spices aren't just food. They're power, status, a fragrant middle finger to the boiled cabbage rotting in your village pot. You realize you've been lied to your entire life. All those years of watery gruel were a choice, not a necessity. The world had flavor this whole time, and nobody in your corner of Europe bothered to tell you. The emotional weight of this discovery is heavier than you expect. You're a knight bred for battle, yet here you are standing in a market clutching a spiced morsel like it's a holy relic. It's humbling, infuriating, exhilarating. You think of your family back home, chewing their joyless meals, unaware that such wonders exist. You imagine bringing a handful of saffron to your wife, watching her eyes light up as she tastes something that doesn't scream despair. But the reality stings. These spices are wealth incarnate, guarded by merchants who know their value. You're a crusader, not a trader, and your purse is as empty as your stomach. The market's chaos mirrors your own journey, loud, disorienting, full of promise and peril. You see peasants from your group, their mud-caked faces alight with wonder, bartering their last copper for a taste of this new world. One man, a farmer who's never left his village before, holds a clove like it's a jewel, whispering about how it could cure his sick child. You don't know if he's right, but you feel his hope, his desperation to believe this crusade might bring something good. The merchants, sharp-eyed and quick-tongued, watch you all with amusement, knowing you're fish out of water, gawking at their wares like children at a fair. This moment isn't just about taste. It's a glimpse into a larger world. You learn that these spices come from lands far beyond the Holy Land, India, the Spice Islands, carried by caravans and ships across deserts and seas. The trade routes are lifelines of wealth, and you, a sweaty knight with a rusty sword, are standing at their crossroads. You don't know it yet, but these spices will reshape Europe. They'll spark trade wars, build empires, and turn cities like Venice into glittering hubs of commerce. For now, though, all you know is that your taste buds are screaming, "Where has this been all my life?" You tuck a pinch of pepper into your pouch, a small act of defiance against the blandness of home. Congratulations, you've just discovered the spice of life, and dinner will never taste like despair again. You're still buzzing from the market's spices, your tongue alive with the sting of pepper and the warmth of cinnamon, when another marvel stops you dead in your tracks. A merchant, his grin as sharp as his prices, offers you a small glistening morsel, candied fruit dripping with a syrup that catches the sunlight like liquid amber. You hesitate, suspicious of anything this beautiful in a world where beauty usually hides a trap. Back home, sweet meant a rare berry snatched from a bush before the birds got to it, or if you were lucky, a lump of doughy bread undercooked enough to taste faintly of hope. Dessert wasn't a concept, it was a fantasy. But you take the plunge, popping the honey-coated fig into your mouth, and your world shifts. The first bite is a revelation, a burst of sweetness that hits your tongue like a divine whisper. Your taste buds, battered by years of muddy turnips and burnt gruel, suddenly think they've ascended to heaven. The syrup clings to your lips, sticky and decadent, making your teeth ache in a way that feels like joy. You try sugar-dusted almonds next, then a sliver of candied citrus, each bite more intoxicating than the last. You're a knight, trained to face death without flinching, yet here you are, vibrating with happiness over a handful of sugared nuts, shoveling them into your mouth like a starved raccoon. This isn't food, it's a miracle. A luxury that makes your village's boiled cabbage seem like a personal insult. You learn quickly that sugar isn't just a treat, it's a status symbol, a currency of wealth and power. The merchant explains, in a tone that suggests he's humoring a barbarian, that sugar comes from far-off plantations, harvested by armies of workers and shipped in guarded convoys across seas you've never heard of. Every bite you're taking is someone's yearly wage, a fact that makes your head spin as much as the sweetness does. Back home, even your lord couldn't afford this on a regular basis. Apothecaries sell it as medicine for stomach ailments, nobles sprinkle it on meat to flaunt their wealth, and pastry makers sculpt it into delicate castles that mock your village's mud huts. You, a dusty crusader with a half-empty purse, are eating the equivalent of a noble's ransom. The physical rush is immediate. Your heart races, your hands shake, and then comes the crash. You slump against a market stall, candied figs still clinging to your fingers, realizing you've just overdosed on what feels like medieval cocaine. And you want more, so much more. The sweetness is addictive, a siren call that drowns out the memory of your village's tasteless gruel. You imagine bringing a sack of sugar home, watching your neighbor's eyes widen as they taste something that doesn't make them sad. But the price is a gut punch. Sugar costs more than your armor, your horse, maybe your entire life. You're not just a knight anymore. You're a dreamer, haunted by a flavor you can't afford to keep. This discovery stirs something deeper, a mix of awe and resentment. You think of the children back home, their faces smudged with dirt, chewing on bread that tastes like despair. You think of your wife stirring a pot of watery stew, unaware that such sweetness exists. The injustice stings. The world has been hiding this from you, hoarding it for the wealthy, the connected, the ones who never had to march through mud for salvation. You see a peasant from your group, his eyes wide as he tastes a sugared almond, and you recognize the same hunger in him, the same realization that life could be more than survival. He whispers about bringing some home for his daughter, and you nod, knowing neither of you can afford it. The market hums around you, a chaotic symphony of voices and scents, but sugar is the loudest note. You watch merchants weigh it like gold, their scales tipping with fortunes. You hear whispers of trade routes stretching to Egypt, to India, where sugar is grown and fought over. You don't know it yet, but this sweet obsession will reshape history. Europe will crave sugar, building empires and wars to feed the addiction you're feeling right now. For you, though, it's personal. Sugar isn't just a flavor. It's a glimpse of a world where life doesn't have to taste like struggle. You lick the last sticky traces from your fingers, vowing to carry this memory home, even if the sugar itself stays out of reach. Congratulations, you're no longer just a crusader. You're a disciple of the sweetest sin the Middle Ages has to offer. You didn't sign up for the Crusades to learn anything. Let's be honest. You came for salvation, a chance at loot, and maybe a story to impress your grandchildren, one where you heroically dodge dysentery and don't die of thirst in some god-forsaken desert. But as you march through the East, battered by heat and hunger, something unexpected happens. Between bouts of dodging arrows and cursing your blistered feet, you start noticing things. Things that make your village's best minds look like they've been napping through the last century. The East, it turns out, is a classroom you never meant to enroll in, and its lessons are about to change your world. Take the doctors. Back home, your village physician is a barber who thinks drilling a hole in your skull cures headaches and wipes his knife on his trousers before calling it clean. Here you see physicians who actually know what they're doing. They set bones with precision, stitch wounds without turning them septic, and, brace yourself, wash their hands before surgery. You watch a healer mix herbs into a poultice that soothes a crusader's fever, and you can't help but think of the time your cousin died because the local quack prescribed a poultice of cow dung. These Eastern doctors speak of balancing humours, of stars guiding health, and their remedies don't smell like a barn. You're no scholar, but you know this is different, better. Then there are the books. You stumble into a library in a city whose name you can't pronounce, and it's like walking into a treasure vault. Shelves groan under the weight of manuscripts, Greek philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, all written in scripts that look like art to your illiterate eyes. Back home, your priest chains his Bible to the pulpit like it's the only book in the world, and he'd burn these as heresy without a second thought. You can't read a word, but you feel the weight of this knowledge, the sense that these pages hold secrets your village never dreamed of. A smarter crusader in your group, one who can actually read whispers about dragging copies back to Europe. You nod, imagining monks back home scratching their heads, wondering why they've been reinventing the wheel for centuries. Numbers hit you next, and they're a revelation. You've never seen the number 0 before. It's just a circle and you're suspicious. How can nothing be a number? Sounds like witchcraft. But then someone explains Arabic numerals, and suddenly counting sheep doesn't take 3 hours and a nervous breakdown. These numbers are sleek, efficient, a far cry from the Roman numerals you've been wrestling with, which look like a drunk scribe's doodles. You try adding 2 and 2 with Arabic numerals, and it's so simple you almost laugh. Back home, tallying your lord's taxes took days. Here, a merchant does it in minutes. You're not a mathematician, but you know this changes everything. Even the architecture teaches you something. You pass mosques with domes that seem to defy gravity, minarets piercing the sky like arrows. Your village church, a squat stone box with a leaky roof, looks like a pig shed in comparison. You see aqueducts still carrying water after centuries, while your village well is a frog-infested swamp. The precision, the beauty, it's humbling. You're a knight, not an engineer, but you can't help but marvel at the skill that built these wonders. You overhear a mason in your group muttering about arches and vaults, his eyes gleaming with ideas he'll carry home. The emotional weight of these discoveries is unexpected. You're here to fight, not to learn, yet the East keeps shoving knowledge in your face. You feel a mix of awe and inadequacy, like a child who's wandered into a scholar's hall. You think of your village, its muddy streets and flickering candles, and realize how small it is, how backward. But there's hope too, a spark of ambition to bring these ideas home. You imagine your priest's shock at a book that isn't chained, your lord's awe at a number that makes taxes less of a nightmare. You're not trying to absorb this knowledge. It's seeping into you unbidden, like water into cracked earth. You don't know it yet, but you're part of a quiet revolution. The ideas you're stumbling across, medicine, math, architecture, will trickle back to Europe, carried by crusaders like you, half confused and wholly unintentional. They'll spark changes that outlast your rusty sword. Universities will grow, scholars will rediscover ancient texts, and your muddy village will start to look a little less like a backwater. You came to fight for God, but you're tripping over science and wisdom like loose coins in the street. Congratulations, you're not just a crusader now. You're an unwitting courier of a world about to wake up. You're a knight, not an art critic, yet here you are, standing slack-jawed in the shadow of a mosque's soaring dome, its curves defying everything you know about stone and gravity. The Crusades have dragged you through mud, blood, and misery. But now in the cities of the East, you're confronted with beauty that hits like a lance to the chest. Back home, your village church is a squat, gloomy rectangle of stone, its walls so plain they make you drowsy, just looking at them. It's a barn with a cross nailed on top, leaking every time it rains. But here in Damascus or Antioch, the buildings make your neck ache from staring upward, your eyes stinging from the sheer audacity of their design. The domes are the first thing to unravel you. They're massive, impossibly smooth, seeming to hover in the sky without any visible support. You can't fathom how anyone built them without divine intervention, or at least a very large ladder. Arches sweep upward, tall enough to make you feel like an ant, their intricate patterns carved with a precision your village mason could only dream of. Then there are the windows, stained glass that glows like captured sunlight, telling stories in colors so vivid they shame the dull arrow slits of your church back home. You stand there, a dusty crusader with a rusty sword, trying to process how humans could create something this close to heaven. The mosques and palaces aren't just buildings. They're a challenge to everything you thought possible. You see tiles shimmering with geometric patterns, each one a small masterpiece, and columns so slender they seem to defy the weight they carry. The Hagia Sophia in Constantinople still haunts you, its vast dome a silent rebuke to your village's crumbling chapel. You overhear a fellow crusader, a mason by trade, muttering about pointed arches and ribbed vaults, his hands sketching shapes in the air as if he could capture this magic and take it home. You don't understand the terms, but you feel the weight of his awe, the same awe that's making you question why your churches look like they were built to survive a siege rather than inspire a soul. The emotional impact is heavier than you expected. You're here to fight, to claim Jerusalem, but these buildings make you feel small, unworthy, yet strangely inspired. You think of your village priest, droning through sermons in a space as welcoming as a crypt, and imagine what he'd say if he saw this. You picture your neighbors, their lives grey and hard, stepping into a church with windows that glow like jewels. For a moment, you're not just a knight, you're a dreamer, longing to bring this beauty back to a world that's forgotten what wonder looks like. You're not alone in this. Other crusaders, hardened men who've faced death without blinking, stand gawking like children, their eyes tracing the curves of arches, their fingers brushing mosaics as if they could carry the glow home. You don't know it yet, but this moment is planting seeds that will grow into Gothic architecture. When you return, if you return, you'll ramble to anyone who'll listen about churches bigger than castles, with windows brighter than the sunrise. The masons back home will laugh at first, calling you a fanciful drunk until one of them dares to try it. Pointed arches will rise, flying buttresses will hold up walls that seem too thin to stand, and stained glass will turn churches into theaters of light. These new cathedrals, like Notre Dame or Chartres, will dwarf your village's stone boxes, their spires reaching for the heavens, their interiors a riot of color and shadow. They'll terrify peasants into piety, making them feel God's gaze in every soaring pillar, every glowing pane. You'll lay a brick maybe and die long before the spire is finished. But your grandchildren will boast, "My kin helped build that." The irony is sharp. You came to stab infidels, not to study architecture, but the East has forced you to see beauty as a weapon of its own. These buildings aren't just stone. They're a call to rethink what's possible. Without your weary march, Europe's churches would stay squat and sad, their roofs leaking, their walls bare. You're not just a crusader now. You're a spark for a revolution in stone and glass, one that will make the Middle Ages glow with a splendor you never meant to inspire. Congratulations! You've gone from wielding a sword to carrying a vision that will outlast empires. You're a crusader, sweating under your armor, your boots worn thin from months of marching and your dreams of glory fraying with every passing day. The Pope's call to reclaim Jerusalem still burns in your chest, but the reality of the Crusades is a slog of hunger, disease, and endless roads. Then you reach Venice and everything shifts. This isn't just a city, it's a machine, a glittering swamp-built empire that thrives not on faith but on profit. While you're risking your life for salvation, the Venetians are counting coins, turning your holy war into their personal gold mine. You thought you were fighting for God, but in Venice, you realize you're also fighting for their bottom line. The city dazzles at first, canals reflecting marble palaces, ships crowding the docks like a forest of masts. You've never seen anything like it. Your village is a muddy patch of thatch and despair. Venice is a labyrinth of water and wealth, its streets alive with merchants in robes finer than your lord's. But the dazzle hides a truth. Venice doesn't care about your crusade. They see you and your fellow crusaders, knights, peasants and all, as walking purses ready to be fleeced. You need ships to reach the Holy Land, and Venice has them. Rickety, fish-scented hulks that leak like sieves but cost a fortune. You try to haggle, but the Venetian merchants just smile, their eyes cold as the lagoon. Don't like the price. Tough? They've got a monopoly and they know it. You hand over what little gold you have, your purse lighter than your spirit, sir. The Venetians don't march with you. They stay behind, selling overpriced wine, stale bread, and ropes that fray before you've even set sail. While you're sweating in the desert, they're sipping spiced wine, their warehouses filling with silks, spices, and sugar brought back on the ships you paid for. It's a bitter pill. You're bleeding for Jerusalem, but Venice is banking on your blood. Every siege, every skirmish, every relic you fight for fuels their trade empire. You're not just a crusader. You're their unpaid labor, hauling treasure across continents while they count the profits from the safety of their canals. The emotional sting cuts deep. You think of the vows you took, the cross sewn onto your tunic, the family you left behind with prayers for your soul. You believed this was a divine mission, but Venice makes you feel like a pawn in a merchant's game. You see their palaces rise, each stone paid for by crusaders like you who traded gold for passage. The local baker lives better than your feudal lord, his house adorned with carvings you could never afford. You overhear a knight muttering about those greedy lagoon rats, and you nod, your resentment growing. Yet there's a grudging respect too. These Venetians are clever, ruthless, turning your chaotic pilgrimage into their golden age. You hate them for it, but you can't look away from their success. The city itself is a testament to their hustle. Markets brim with goods from the east, pepper that costs more than your horse, silks that shimmer like water. Festivals spill into the streets, masks and music mocking your muddy village feasts. While you're dodging arrows in Antioch, they're hosting banquets, toasting their wealth with goblets you'd have to sell your armor to touch. Venice isn't just getting rich, it's getting powerful. Their navy rules the seas, their bankers hold kings' debts, and soon even emperors will bow to their coin. You realize with a sinking heart that your crusade is their business playground, a venture where you risk everything and they gain it all. This moment reshapes your view of the crusade. You set out for salvation, but you've stumbled into a world where gold speaks louder than God. Venice's wealth is a mirror reflecting your own poverty, of coin, of knowledge, of control. You think of home, where your neighbors will never see this city's splendor, never taste the spices you've discovered, never know how their sacrifices enrich a lagoon far away. Yet you carry a spark of their ambition. If you survive, you'll tell tales of Venice's canals, its cunning merchants, its glittering greed. Those tales will plant seeds, stirring Europe to chase trade and wealth. For now, though, you board their leaky ship, your heart heavy with faith and fury. Congratulations, you're not just a crusader. You're the muscle behind Venice's rise, a soldier in a war that's making merchants kings. You thought the Crusades were a noble quest, a straight march to Jerusalem with a sword in one hand and a cross in the other. Instead, it feels like the world's worst package tour, a chaotic, deadly caravan of dreamers, drunks, and the dangerously devout. You're a knight, theoretically leading this mess, but the reality is you're herding a mob of peasants, zealots, and opportunists who think salvation comes with a complimentary map to paradise. The Pope's call at Clermont painted this as a divine pilgrimage, but out here on the endless roads of the East, it's a carnival of bad decisions, where half your group is lost, the other half is starving, and you're starting to think God might have a sense of humor after all. The journey is a logistical nightmare. Back home, your village considered a trip to the next hamlet a grand adventure. Now you're crossing continents, with no itinerary, no supplies, and no clue where you're going. Your army is a hodgepodge. Knights like you weighed down by armor that cooks you in the sun. Peasants with homemade spears, their shoes long gone. And holy men preaching doom to anyone who'll listen. The guy leading your group claims he's got a map, but it's just a sheepskin with some squiggles that might be rivers or might be his lunch stains. You've been walking for weeks, maybe months. Time blurs when every day is a fight to not die of thirst. Someone swears Jerusalem is just over that hill, but you've heard that for 10 hills now, and all you've found is more dust. Hunger is your constant companion. You started with a sack of bread and some dried meat, but that's long gone. Now you're eating roots, leaves, anything that doesn't fight back. So a peasant in your group tries boiling his shoe, claiming it's almost soup. It's not. Disease stalks you like a shadow. Dysentery, fever, things you don't have names for. Every morning you wake to find another body left behind, a grim reminder that faith doesn't fill bellies or cure infections. Ambushes don't help. Locals, unimpressed by your holy mission, hit your straggling line with arrows and rocks. You swing your sword, but it's hard to feel heroic when you're fighting off bandits for a half-rotten apple. Yet there's a strange camaraderie in the chaos. You share your last crust with a farmer who's never held a weapon before, his hands trembling as he tells you about the wife he left behind. You laugh with a monk who's convinced the stars are guiding you, even as you trip over rocks in the dark. At night, around flickering campfires, stories spill out, tales of home, of miracles, of the Jerusalem you all imagine, its streets shining with gold. It's absurd, this mix of despair and hope, like a festival thrown in a graveyard. You're all in this together, bound by a dream that's starting to feel like a fever. The peasant who thought he'd be a hero by now is still here, singing hymns off-key, and you can't help but admire his stubbornness. The emotional toll is heavier than your armor. You think of the family you left, their faces fading with every mile. Your wife's last words, "Come back to me," echo in your head, but the road makes promises it can't keep. You wonder if you're marching to salvation or a shallow grave. Yet there's something alive in this chaos, something that keeps you moving. You see it in the eyes of the boy who joined for adventure, his grin defiant despite his bleeding feet. You feel it when you help a stranger stand after a fall, his muttered thanks warmer than the fire. This isn't the crusade you were sold, a glorious charge to victory, but it's real, raw human. You don't know it, but this disastrous tour is forging something new. The stories you tell around the campfire, the skills you pick up from surviving, the glimpses of foreign lands, they're all pieces of a puzzle that will reshape Europe. You're learning to navigate, to barter, to endure, and those lessons will trickle back home, carried by the few who survive. For now, though, you're just trying to keep your group from eating their belts. You march on, one blistered foot in front of the other, part of a chaotic, holy mess that's less a crusade and more a testament to human stubbornness. Congratulations, you're not just a knight. You're a survivor on the world's worst road trip, and somehow you're still going. You've been marching through the East for what feels like a lifetime. Your armor battered, your faith tested by hunger and heat. The Crusades have taught you to expect enemies, bandits, rival armies, even the merciless sun itself. But now, as you approach the Holy Land, you hear a name whispered with a mix of fear and respect: Saladin. He's not just another warlord. He's a legend in the making, a Muslim leader whose shadow looms over your ragtag crusade. You're a knight, trained to see foes as godless obstacles, but Saladin defies that. He's not the villain you were promised. He's something far more dangerous, a man who outshines you in every way. You first hear of him in camp, from a grizzled crusader who's seen too many battles. Saladin, he says, is a strategist who moves armies like pieces on a chessboard, always 3 steps ahead. He united warring Muslim factions under one banner, something you thought impossible, given how your own crusader leaders bicker over who gets the best tent. His troops don't just fight. They glide, striking like lightning and vanishing before you can swing your sword. You've faced ambushes before, but Saladin's are surgical. Wells poisoned, supply lines cut. Your men left parched and panicked. He doesn't just want victory. He wants you to know you never had a chance. What unsettles you most isn't his tactics, it's his honor. You're used to war as a brutal, petty thing. Enemies who slaughter prisoners, who loot bodies before they're cold. But Saladin is different. Stories filter through the ranks. He spares captives, feeds them, even sends doctors to treat their wounds. When his men capture a crusader noble, Saladin returns him with a gift of fruit, as if war is a polite disagreement. You hear of him ransoming prisoners back to their families, not for gold but to show mercy. You, a knight who's seen comrades butcher villages for less, feel a pang of shame. How is it that the infidel acts more like a knight than your own side? The emotional weight hits hard. You came to the Holy Land expecting clear lines, good versus evil, Christian versus Muslim. But Saladin blurs them. You catch yourself admiring him, his calm dignity a contrast to your leader's squabbling. Around the campfire, a fellow crusader mutters, "If God's on our side, why's Saladin winning?" You don't have an answer. You think of your village, where the priest painted Muslims as devils. But this man feels more like a mirror reflecting your own flaws. His chivalry makes your crusade feel grubby, your holy mission tainted by greed and chaos. You wonder if you're the barbarian here, not him. Saladin's presence reshapes the battlefield. His armies don't just fight for land. They fight for a cause, a unified vision that makes your fractured crusade look like a drunken brawl. You hear he prays 5 times a day, his faith as unyielding as his sword, and you can't help but respect it, even as it threatens you. He's not just a warrior, he's a statesman, rebuilding cities while you're burning them. When he recaptures Jerusalem, you hear he protects its holy sites, letting Christians pray where your side would have smashed idols. You're supposed to hate him, but hate feels too simple for a man who fights with such grace. You don't know it yet, but Saladin's legacy will outlast your crusade. His name will echo through history, a symbol of honor in a world of brutality. You'll carry his story home if you survive, telling tales of a foe who was more noble than your allies. Those tales will shape Europe's view of the East, planting seeds of respect amid the hatred. For now, though, you're just a knight, gripping your sword a little tighter, knowing you're up against a man who's better at this game than you'll ever be. Congratulations, you're not just a crusader, you're a witness to a legend, one whose shadow makes your holy war feel like a footnote. You're a knight, your hands more accustomed to a sword than a quill, your world one of sweat and steel, not scrolls. The Crusades have already thrown you into a whirlwind of new sights, spices, domes, Saladin's shadow, but now in a quiet corner of an eastern market, you stumble across something deceptively simple. Paper. It's not the heavy, costly parchment you're used to, scraped from sheepskin and guarded like gold in your village monastery. This is light, smooth, almost flimsy, and the merchant tosses it around like it's nothing. You pick up a sheet, expecting it to tear under your calloused fingers, but it holds. You're suspicious. How can something this cheap-looking change anything? But this unassuming invention is about to rewrite your world. Back home, writing is a luxury. Parchment costs a fortune. Each sheet a dead animal, weeks of labor, and enough coin to feed your family for a month. Your priest hoards his Bible like a dragon, chaining it to the pulpit, and the few books in your lord's castle are treated like relics, not tools. Here, though, paper flows like water. Merchants scribble accounts on it, scholars stack it in piles, and even street poets jot down verses without a second thought. You watch a scribe dash off a letter in minutes, his ink drying on a surface that doesn't smell like a barnyard. You try it yourself, scratching a clumsy cross with the borrowed quill, and it feels like magic. Writing that doesn't bankrupt you. The implications hit you slowly, like a sunrise. Paper means knowledge doesn't have to be a rich man's game. Back home, only monks and nobles can afford to record anything, and even then they're stingy with it. A single book could take a year to make, and copying it was a monk's life sentence. Here, knowledge spreads like wildfire. You see stacks of paper covered in Arabic script, mathematics, medicine, star charts, ideas that could fit in your saddlebag, not a vault. A crusader beside you, a clerk who knows his letters, mutters about copying whole books in weeks, not years. You laugh, thinking he's drunk, but his eyes are wide with possibility. You're starting to see it too. This isn't just about writing, it's about power. The emotional weight is subtle but heavy. You think of your village, where the only written words are the priest's sermons and your lord's tax demands, scratched on wax tablets or whispered in fear. Paper could change that. Imagine a world where your son could learn to read without selling the farm, where ideas aren't locked in monasteries, but shared like bread. You feel a pang of frustration. Why didn't Europe figure this out? The East, with its libraries and paper-strewn markets, makes your homeland feel like it's been asleep for centuries. You're no scholar, but you sense this could shift everything: trade, law, even the church's grip on truth. You don't know it yet, but paper is a quiet revolution. When you return, if you return, you'll carry tales of this lightweight wonder. The clerk in your group is already scheming to smuggle a stack home, dreaming of a day when Europe's monasteries churn out books by the dozen. He's right. Paper will flood Europe, making knowledge cheap, spreading ideas faster than a horse can gallop. It'll fuel scholars, spark debates, and eventually loosen the church's stranglehold on learning. Your muddy village will one day have its own books, its own records, because of the flimsy sheets you're holding now. For the moment, though, you're just a knight, marveling at a page that weighs less than your dagger, but carries the weight of a new world. Congratulations! You're not just a crusader. You're a courier for the future, carrying a revolution in your calloused hands. You're a knight, hardened by the trials of the Crusades, your faith and sword arm carrying you through years of dust, blood, and broken dreams. By 1204, the Fourth Crusade promises a fresh start, a grand mission to reclaim Jerusalem backed by the Pope's blessing and Venice's ships. You set out with visions of holy triumph, but what unfolds is a disaster so spectacular, it feels like the devil himself is directing the show. Instead of storming the Holy Land, you find yourself sacking Christian cities, betraying your own cause, and turning your crusade into a looting spree that leaves a bitter taste no amount of stolen gold can wash away. It starts with Venice, those lagoon-dwelling profiteers who've already bled you dry for passage. They've got a new deal. Help them attack Zara, a Christian city on the Dalmatian coast, and they'll ferry you to Jerusalem. You balk. Attacking fellow Christians feels like spitting on your own cross, but your leaders, desperate and broke, agree. You march on Zara, your heart heavy with doubt, and watch as your crusade's holy purpose crumbles. The city's walls fall, its churches are looted, and you see crusaders, men who swore to fight for God, pocketing silver candlesticks like common thieves. The Pope excommunicates you all, but the damage is done. Zara burns, and your mission feels like a lie. Then comes Constantinople, the glittering jewel you once gawked at in awe. Your leaders, swayed by Venetian greed and a scheming Byzantine prince, decide to attack it too. You're stunned. This is no infidel stronghold. It's the heart of Eastern Christianity, a city of golden domes and sacred relics. Yet in 1204, you're storming its mighty walls, your sword clashing against Christian defenders who fight with the same desperation you once felt for Jerusalem. The city falls and the looting begins. You see crusaders smash altars, strip mosaics, and cart off treasures, icons, jewels, even the bones of saints. Palaces are gutted, libraries burned, and you stand amid the chaos, clutching a stolen chalice, wondering how salvation turned into sacrilege. The emotional toll is crushing. You left home for glory for God, but now you're a vandal in a holy city, your hands stained with betrayal. You think of your family, praying for your soul back in your village, unaware you're desecrating the very faith they hold dear. A fellow knight, his face smeared with ash, mutters, "This isn't what I swore to do." You nod, your throat tight. The Venetians, meanwhile, are grinning, their ships loaded with Constantinople's wealth, their empire growing fat while your soul shrinks. You realize you're not a crusader anymore. You're a pawn in their game, a hired thug for merchants who worship coin over Christ. The fallout is catastrophic. Constantinople, once a beacon of civilization, lies in ruins, its people slaughtered or enslaved, its legacies shattered. The Byzantine Empire, already fragile, staggers toward collapse, leaving a wound between East and West that will fester for centuries. You hear whispers of survivors cursing the Crusaders, their hatred as sharp as the swords that cut them down. The dream of a united Christendom, fragile to begin with, is dead, and you helped kill it. Your crusade, meant to reclaim Jerusalem, has instead gutted the greatest Christian city in the world. The Pope's absolution feels hollow when you're drowning in guilt. You don't know it yet, but this failure will echo through history. The Fourth Crusade will be remembered as a turning point, not for holy victories, but for greed and betrayal. The treasures you stole will spark Europe's hunger for Eastern wealth, fueling trade and ambition, but at a cost. The rift between Catholic and Orthodox churches will deepen, sowing seeds of division that outlast empires. For now, though, you're just a knight, standing in a sacked city, your armor dented, your faith cracked. You wanted to be a hero. Instead, you're a cautionary tale. Congratulations, you're not just a crusader. You're a witness to a holy war that broke its own heart, leaving scars that time won't heal. You're a knight, your world once confined to the muddy syllables of your village dialect, where cabbage and taxes were the most exciting words you knew. The Crusades have already battered you with new sights, spices, domes, sacked cities, but now in the markets and camps of the East, you're tripping over something subtler. Words. Strange, slippery sounds from Arabic, Greek, and Turkish tongues that roll off merchants' lips and lodge in your ears like stubborn burrs. They're not just noises. They're keys to a world you didn't know existed, and they're about to rewrite the way you think, talk, and dream. It starts small. You hear a trader shout "Sucre" as he weighs a sack of that sweet, sinful sugar you've come to crave. The word sticks, cleaner than the clumsy, honeyed stuff you'd mutter back home. You try it yourself, stumbling over the syllables, and a fellow crusader laughs, but you don't care. It feels right, like the sugar itself, sharp, exotic, alive. Then comes algebra, a term for the mathematics you've seen scholars scribble, making sense of numbers in ways your Roman numerals never could. You don't understand the equations, but the word feels like a spell, conjuring order from chaos. By the time you hear tariff in a Venetian's haggling, you're collecting these words like relics, each one a piece of the East you can carry home. The markets are a linguistic stew. Arabic flows like poetry, Greek hums with ancient weight, Turkish snaps with urgency. You're no scholar. Reading is for monks and madmen, but you feel the power of these words. They're not just sounds. They're ideas, tools, ways of seeing. Back home, your language is a blunt club. Plow, pray, die. Here, words shimmer with possibility. You overhear a crusader, a clerk who fancies himself clever, try zaytun for olives, grinning like he's cracked a code. You mimic him, and suddenly your village's sad, oily fruits have a name that sounds like adventure. The emotional impact sneaks up on you. You think of your children, growing up with the same tired words you did. Their world as small as the village well. These new words, Sukkar, Aljaber, Admiral, carry the East's magic, its wealth, its knowledge. You imagine teaching them to your son, watching his eyes widen as he says saffron instead of yellow stuff. It's a small act of rebellion against the drudgery of home, a way to bring the world's vastness to a place that's never seen it. But there's a pang too, a sense of loss. Your language feels poor now, inadequate, like a rusty sword next to a Damascus blade. You're not just learning words. You're realizing how much your world has been missing. These words aren't just for you. They're spreading like wildfire among the Crusaders. A peasant calls his blanket a divan, after lounging on one in a market. A knight dubs his new drink sherbet, the word as cool as the liquid itself. You laugh at their clumsy pronunciations, but you're no better, tripping over algebra like it's a stone in the road. Yet each mispronounced syllable is a bridge, linking your muddy village to the East's markets, libraries, and shipyards. You don't know it yet, but these words will seep into Europe's languages, reshaping how people trade, think, and dream. Sugar will sweeten English, algebra will sharpen mathematics, and tariff will haunt merchants' ledgers for centuries. For now, though, you're just a knight, your tongue wrestling with sounds that feel like they belong to someone smarter, richer, better. You practice saying Zaytun under your breath, hoping it'll make you sound worldly when you get home, if you get home. These words are souvenirs, proof you've seen a world bigger than your village's fields. They're small, but they carry the weight of empires, of ideas that will outlast your sword and your name. Congratulations, you're not just a crusader. You're a smuggler of language, carrying pieces of the East that will change Europe's voice forever. You're a knight, your body bruised and your spirit battered from years on the Crusades' brutal road. Jerusalem feels like a fever dream, and salvation seems as distant as the stars. But when you finally limp back to Europe, your purse empty and your armor dented, you find a new battlefield, the tavern. Here in the glow of flickering candles and the haze of cheap ale, you become something more than a weary crusader. You become a storyteller, spinning tales of the East that grow taller with every mug. The Crusades may have broken your body, but in these smoky rooms, they forge you into a legend. Back home, your village hasn't changed. Same mud, same sour cabbage, same neighbors squinting at you like you're a ghost. But when you step into the tavern, all eyes are on you. The locals, whose biggest adventure was chasing a runaway pig, lean in as you describe Constantinople's golden domes, so vast they block the sky. You tell of markets bursting with spices that burn your tongue, of Saladin's armies moving like shadows, of battles where you, yes, you, stood firm against impossible odds. The truth? You spent most of your time dodging dysentery and cursing your leaky boots. But truth doesn't matter here. The tavern demands heroes, and you're happy to oblige. You stretch the story like dough. That skirmish with bandits becomes a clash with 1,000 Saracens, your rusty sword flashing like a saint's relic. The merchant who cheated you out of your last coin has now a cunning warlord you outwitted with knightly guile. The crowd eats it up, their eyes wide, their ale forgotten. A farmer buys you a drink. A barmaid blushes at your exaggerated valor, and for a moment you feel like the hero you wanted to be. You don't mention the friends buried in foreign dirt, the nights spent shivering under a thin blanket, or the guilt of sacking Christian cities. Those truths stay buried. The tavern wants glory, not grief. The emotional weight of this role is heavier than you expected. Each tale you spin is a lifeline, a way to make sense of the chaos you survived. You see it in the faces of your listeners, peasants, blacksmiths, even the local priest. They're hungry for a world beyond their fields, a world where men like you can fight for God and come back shining. You give them that, even if it means polishing the truth until it gleams. But there's a cost. Every time you exaggerate a victory, you feel the real ones, small moments of courage, of camaraderie, slip further away. You wonder if you're betraying the dead by making their suffering sound like a ballad. The stories spread beyond the tavern. Priests weave your tales into sermons, turning your half-truths into lessons of faith. Bards pick them up, strumming lutes as they sing of crusaders who wrestled demons and won. Your name might not survive, but the legends do, growing wilder with each retelling. A peasant boy listens, dreaming of his own crusade, unaware of the hunger and horror waiting. You see his starry eyes and feel a pang. Should you warn him or let him chase the myth? You choose silence because the tavern doesn't pay for caution. You don't know it yet, but these stories are shaping the Middle Ages. They'll inspire knights, fuel more crusades, and cement the idea of the heroic warrior in Europe's soul. Your tales of Eastern wonders, spices, silks, impossible cities, will stir merchants to seek trade routes, nobles to fund expeditions, and poets to dream bigger. The Crusades were a mess of greed and failure, but in the tavern they become a spark for ambition, for a Europe waking up to the world. For now, though, you're just a knight, your voice hoarse from ale and storytelling, spinning myths to keep the cold at bay. Congratulations, you're not just a crusader, you're a maker of legends, forging a legacy one exaggerated tale at a time. You're back in Europe, a knight scarred by the Crusades, your dreams of Jerusalem faded but your sword arm still itching for purpose. The Holy Land taught you war's grim reality, mud, blood and betrayal. But back home, the tavern tales have painted you as a hero, and the villagers expect you to act the part. Enter the joust, a spectacle born from the chaos you survived, transforming the brutal melees of your youth into a glittering theatre of chivalry. It's not just a sport. It's a way to keep the Crusades' fire burning, to prove you're still a knight in a world that's starting to forget why you left. Back before the Crusades, tournaments were messy brawls, mock battles where knights like you charged in packs, trampling fields and occasionally each other, with broken bones and grudges as the only prizes. They were war without purpose, a way to burn off the boredom of peacetime. But the East changed you. You saw discipline in Saladin's armies, elegance in Constantinople's courts, and you brought those lessons home. Now in the early 13th century, the joust emerges as something new. A one-on-one duel, all pomp and precision, where you can shine without slaughtering half the countryside. You strap on your armor, mount your horse, and feel the weight of a lance that's more about show than survival. The field is a riot of color, banners snapping in the wind, crowds roaring, ladies tossing flowers that smell sweeter than the desert dust you still cough up. You face your opponent, a fellow knight with a shield painted brighter than yours, and charge down the lists, the world narrowing to the tip of your lance and the thud of hooves. The crash when it comes is deafening. Wood splinters, horses scream, and the crowd erupts. You stay seated barely, your heart pounding like it did in Antioch. But this time there's no blood, just cheers. You're not fighting for God or gold now. You're fighting for honor, for the chance to be the hero your tavern tales promised. The emotional pull is intoxicating. Jousting lets you recapture the Crusades' thrill without the dysentery or guilt. You feel alive, your purpose renewed, as if the East's lessons, courage, discipline, spectacle, have found a home in this muddy field. The crowd sees you as a knight from the songs, not the weary man who buried friends in foreign soil. But there's a shadow too. Every charge reminds you of real battles, of comrades who didn't come back. You dedicate your victories to them, whispering their names as you tilt. But the flowers and cheers can't erase the memories of screams and sand. Jousting isn't just for you. It's for the crowd, the nobles, the whole of Europe catching the Crusades' fever. The spectacle spreads, drawing knights from every corner, each trying to outdo the last with fancier armor or bolder crests. It's a stage for chivalry, a code you picked up from Saladin's honor and the East's elegance, now polished into rules of courtesy and courage. Peasants watch, dreaming of knighthood. Nobles sponsor tournaments, flaunting wealth with feasts and prizes. Even the church, grumbling about the violence, can't resist the allure. They'll bless the lances soon enough, turning jousts into holy pageants. You don't know it yet, but jousting will outlast your Crusades' failures. It'll become the heartbeat of medieval culture, a way to keep the knightly ideal alive as wars grow fewer and castles turn to courts. The skills you honed in the desert, horsemanship, precision, raw nerve, will live on in every charge, every shattered lance. Future generations will romanticize you, forgetting the mud and misery, seeing only the gleaming armor and gallant tilts. For now, though, you're just a knight, Your lance steady, your heart racing as the crowd chants your name. Congratulations, you're not just a crusader. You're the spark of a spectacle that will make the Middle Ages shine, one glorious charge at a time. You're a knight, your soul tethered to the Crusades' promise of salvation, your days filled with the clash of steel and the weight of faith. The East has shown you wonders, spices, paper, soaring domes, but it's also stirred questions about the divine, about why you march and bleed for a God who feels so distant. As you hear tales of the ancient oracle of Delphi, a priestess whose cryptic words once guided empires, you sense a strange echo of your own journey. Her story, though centuries old, feels like a mirror to the Crusades, a reminder that humans have always sought answers from powers beyond their grasp, and paid a price for it. The oracle, they say, was the Pythia, a woman chosen to channel Apollo's voice in a temple perched on a Greek mountainside. You picture her, cloaked in mystery, seated above a chasm where vapors rose, her words slurred with divine madness. Kings and warriors knelt before her, begging for guidance on wars, harvests, or betrayals, just as you knelt before priests promising Jerusalem's glory. Her prophecies were riddles, never clear, always costly, yet men staked their lives on them. You can't help but see the parallel. You march on the Pope's vague promises, chasing a holy city with no guarantee you'll find it, your faith both a fire and a fog. Her selection was no small thing. You learned she was chosen young, trained to surrender her body to the God's will, her life consumed by the role. She wasn't just a voice. She was a vessel, her every breath a sacrifice. You think of your own vows, the cross you sewed onto your tunic, the family you left behind. Like the Pythia, you've given yourself to a higher call, your path dictated by men claiming to speak for the divine. Her temple was a beacon for pilgrims, just as Jerusalem pulls you now, a distant hope that demands everything, your strength, your sanity, your life. The emotional weight of this parallel cuts deep. You feel the Pythia's burden in your own bones. She spoke in riddles and you march on faith, both of you trusting in something bigger than yourselves, yet haunted by doubt. Did she ever wonder if Apollo was silent? Do you ever wonder if God's will is just your leader's greed? Her prophecies shaped Greece, sending armies to triumph or ruin, just as the Pope's call has sent you to sack cities or starve in deserts. You imagine her, alone after the pilgrims left, her visions fading, and you see yourself, camped under a merciless sky, praying for a sign that this crusade isn't a mistake. The oracle story isn't just a curiosity, it's a warning. Her temple drew the desperate and ambitious, just as the Crusades draw knights and peasants chasing salvation or glory. Her words sparked wars, much like the Pope's sermon sparked yours. But her power waned, her temple now a ruin, her God silent. You wonder if your crusade will end the same way, a fleeting dream, leaving only stones and stories. Yet there's a spark of hope. The pilgrims who sought her carried her influence across Greece, just as you're carrying the East's wonders, spices, words, ideas, back to Europe. Your failures, like hers, might still shape the future. You don't know it yet, but this parallel will linger in history's shadows. The Crusades, like the oracle, will be remembered as a moment when faith drove men to madness and marvels, when divine promises led to both ruin and renewal. For now you're just a knight, your armor heavy with doubt, your heart tethered to a city you may never reach. The Pythia's story reminds you that you're part of something ancient, a human hunger for meaning that outlasts temples and crusades. Congratulations, you're not just a crusader, you're a pilgrim in a timeless quest, chasing answers from a God who speaks in riddles. You're a knight, your life defined by the Crusades' call, sword in hand, cross on your chest, marching for salvation through a haze of dust and blood. But as you trudge through the East, leaving behind a trail of battles and broken dreams, your thoughts drift to the women you left behind, especially the mothers. Their world back in your village seems a lifetime away, yet their struggles echo the Crusades' themes of duty, sacrifice, and survival. Motherhood in the medieval world, you realize, is its own kind of crusade, fought not with steel but with resilience, in the shadow of your absence and the era's relentless hardships. Back home, a mother's life is a battle against odds as brutal as any Saracen ambush. You think of your own mother, or perhaps your wife, her hands calloused from spinning wool, her days a blur of grinding grain and tending children who might not survive the winter. Childbirth is her battlefield, a gamble where death stalks both mother and babe. You've heard the stories. Half the infants don't see their first birthday, and every birth risks a mother's life. No priest offers absolution for her pain. No tavern sings her victories, yet she fights on, her courage quieter but no less fierce than yours. You left for Jerusalem chasing glory. She stayed holding the world together. The emotional weight hits you like a lance. You remember the day you left, your mother pressing a worn wooden cross into your hand, her eyes wet with a fear she wouldn't voice. Or your wife, cradling your child, whispering prayers for your return while knowing you might become just another name lost to the East. Her sacrifice mirrors yours. She sends her son, her husband, to a war she can't fight. Her faith tested not by battles but by endless waiting. You march for salvation, but she lives for survival, keeping the hearth burning, the children fed, the village whole. Her strength is a silent hymn, sung in the clatter of pots and the lullabies over a feverish child. The parallels to your crusade are stark. You march under a divine promise, uncertain if it's truth or illusion. She labors under vows of marriage and motherhood, her rewards as uncertain as your Jerusalem. You face hunger and disease. She battles famine and plague, her children's lives hanging on a harvest that might fail. You've seen comrades fall, their bodies left in foreign dirt. She buries infants, their graves unmarked in the village churchyard. Yet, like you, she endures, driven by a purpose bigger than herself. You fight for God's city. She fights for the next generation, her love a shield against a world that offers no mercy. You don't know it yet, but these mothers are the backbone of the world you're fighting to change. The spices, words, and ideas you bring back from the East will reshape Europe, but it's their hands that will weave those changes into daily life. Cooking with pepper, teaching children new words, dreaming of the cathedrals you describe. Their resilience ensures there's a home to return to, a future for the stories you tell. Without them, your crusade is just noise, a fleeting clash of swords. They're the unsung crusaders, their victories uncelebrated but no less vital. For now you're just a knight, your heart heavy with the miles between you and home. You carry the memory of your mother's face or your wife's, their strength a quiet fire that keeps you marching. You vow to return, to tell them of the East's wonders, to make their sacrifices mean something. Their crusade, fought in the cradle and the kitchen, is as holy as yours, and you're starting to see it. Congratulations, you're not just a crusader. You're a son, a husband tethered to women whose courage carries the weight of your world, their silent battles the foundation of every step you take. You're a knight, your body scarred and your soul stretched thin by the crusade's long, brutal road. You set out for Jerusalem chasing salvation and glory, but what you found is a world bigger, stranger, and more humbling than you ever imagined. The Holy Land remains elusive, your purse is empty and your faith is frayed, yet as you prepare to return home, or limp to whatever's left of your journey, you carry something unexpected, a legacy. Not the one you planned, not of conquest or divine triumph, but of ideas, tastes, and transformations that will reshape Europe more than your sword ever could. The Crusades, for all their failures, have made you an unwitting architect of the future. You didn't mean to change the world. You wanted to fight for God, maybe grab some loot and come home a hero. Instead, you've become a courier of the East's wonders. The spices, pepper, cinnamon, saffron, still linger on your tongue, a reminder of markets that made your village's gruel taste like defeat. You've tucked a pinch of cloves in your pouch, dreaming of the day your wife seasons a stew with something other than despair. Those spices will spark trade routes, turning cities like Venice into empires and sending ships to distant shores. Your hunger for flavor, born in a dusty bazaar, will fuel Europe's appetite for the world. Then there's paper, that flimsy miracle you scoffed at, but now can't forget. It's cheaper than parchment, lighter than your sins, and it's already changing how knowledge moves. You imagine monks back home, no longer slaving over sheepskin, copying books by the dozen. The words you stumbled over, sukar al-jabr zaitun, will slip into Europe's languages, making them richer, sharper, ready for a world that's waking up. The domes and arches you gawked at in Damascus will inspire masons to build cathedrals that scrape the sky, their stained glass glowing with the East's borrowed light. You didn't build these things, but you carried their spark, a knight-turned messenger without meaning to. The emotional weight of this legacy is heavy, almost crushing. You think of the friends buried in foreign dirt, the cities you sacked, the promises you broke. The Crusades were supposed to be a divine mission, but they've been a mess of greed, betrayal, and loss. Yet, from that chaos, something new is growing. You feel it in your bones, a sense that your failures, your survival, have set something in motion. You're no hero, not the one the tavern bards will sing about, but you've seen a world your village couldn't dream of. You've tasted its sweetness, learned its words, and glimpsed its possibilities. That knowledge carried in your weary heart will outlast your name. You don't know it yet, but the Crusades' unintended legacy will redefine Europe. The trade routes you helped open will bring wealth and war, spices and silks, fueling economies and ambitions. The knowledge you glimpsed, mathematics, medicine, architecture, will seed universities, spark debates, and loosen the church's grip on truth. The stories you told in taverns, exaggerated as they were, will inspire adventurers to sail beyond the horizon. Even your failures, like the Fourth Crusade's betrayal, will shift power, weakening Byzantium and strengthening the West's hunger for empire. You were a small piece of a vast, messy puzzle, and somehow it's coming together. For now you're just a knight, your armor dented, your steps heavy with the weight of what you've seen. You think of home, of the family waiting, of the muddy fields that will feel small after the East's vastness. You'll tell them of spices that burn, of cities that shine, of a world that's bigger than their prayers. You didn't conquer Jerusalem, but you brought back something else, a vision of what could be. Congratulations, you're not just a crusader. You're a bridge between worlds, a weary traveler whose stumbles helped Europe take its first steps toward a new age.